So, guys, why don't people journal? Like, why is it that it's like this thing that people don't do?
I honestly think it's because we're too busy. Like, if you think about it, like it takes intentionality, it takes time. When done well, it takes space. And if you're overextended, overcommitted, like just going from one thing to the next, which so many of us can do, then when are you going to have time to sit down, pull out a pencil or pen, and actually write thoughts, feelings, processes, all of those things down?
Let's see. I think, Josh, what you just said, when you write down thoughts and feelings, that means we actually have to be honest with our thoughts and feelings.
Boom, there it is.
And it's within the slowing down process, right? But
yeah,
when you sit down with a pen and a piece of paper and you breathe and you start to write, things come out that sometimes we're not comfortable with. Sometimes I'm not comfortable with.
That's
and
good.
I think people, it's that white noise that we run through in life of space, time, energy, activity. I think people sometimes am afraid of sitting down and actually writing what I feel.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think people, myself included, it's just way easier to zone out, to self-medicate. We all have our drug of choice, whether it's Netflix or, whatever it may be, Facebook, alcohol, you name it. We all have that escape, if you will. When you sit down and it's quiet and you've got pen and paper, old school, like you're going to write out something. It's a very vulnerable place. And I think people in general, me at times, it's like, I don't know if I want to go there.
I don't have the energy today to go there. I don't have the ability today. Yeah.
But the thing is, that one day turns into a week and it turns into a month. And then and that's why psychologists, they have a job. That's why psychologists will always have a job, right? We just numb to the pain. And then we wake up 2 or 3 years later. We haven't allowed Jesus into that space. And we're a wreck.
One person said we have a backpack of things that we carry around with us, that if we never unpack it, it just gets heavier and heavier.
Yeah, totally.
And journaling is a way to lighten the load.
Free and light, baby. That's it.
Welcome to the podcast.
Hey friends, it's Tim at Sequel. Welcome back to the conversation with my boys Josh and Bill as we continue talking about what it looks like to chase after Jesus and live with rhythm. Fellas, how you doing today?
Good, man.
Doing good.
This is just so you guys know, number 3 on the day.
Wow.
So it's early.
I'm 5 or 6 in, so I'm a little amped up because we're talking about one of my favorite topics, journaling. Now, listen, people, I know that you might think like journaling is for poets, or whatever the case is, but like we're not talking about keeping a diary or writing an autobiography. We're talking about something totally different. So Josh, like fill us in, man. What is the point of journaling and why do we make such a big deal about this?
I would definitely say then it gives us a record and that ability just to remember the things that we experience, in our quiet time for sure, our time with Jesus and those moments, the things that rise to the surface, the things that like his heart's saying to ours. But it's also like, it can just be this highlight reel of life and how those things like hopefully intersect. Really, it's that process of just recording what God is saying and doing. And I don't know about you guys, but like over the years, my stack of journals is getting taller, which is cool to see. Because I hold on to them. I know some people might not, but I think most people do. And it also like it forces me, someone who's always just kind of wants to go and kind of has a little bit of that maybe undiagnosed ADD, like going on to the next thing. It really forces me to slow down and process. Like I can't tell you how many times I've been writing, and when I start, literally the thought in my head, I have this all the time, it's like, oh, this is so slow. Like if I could type it, or if I could just record it, that could go quicker, it just go quicker. But it like forces me to physically like slow down, and then I'm mentally slowing down, and then honestly spiritually slowing down. And sometimes it's just like focusing in on singular words. So
yeah, I know, Josh, I totally resonate with the slowing down piece, man. Like, I'm like, can I voice text this? Like, do you think that'll work better? Like if that can happen? Tim, I know for me, the journaling thing has happened for years, and it started, one of my first journals I found a few months ago, cleaning my basement, was from 1998 from a mission trip in Costa Rica, that Tim and I went on.
Oh my word.
So I
Dude,
literally
we dyed our hair blonde.
We did. We have pictures of that. But this is so funny because we're talking about this idea of journaling, and we've been in this rhythm now for a few years. This is 20 something years ago, right? So I started flipping through it, and throughout the hangman and like pointing to different pictures of people we were drawing in the crowd where we were at. It was literally just taking notes on the service. Like, okay, so this is a scripture that got talked about. Here's the application point. And I read through it, and it was fun to read through it, but there was nothing personal. It was just, this is what's happening. This is what's happening. This is what's happening. And I thought about this conversation today, and I'm like, man, for me, journaling is not about what's happening in the world. It's about what's happening in me. And if I can start to document that on a regular basis of what God's doing in my heart and my life, rather than what somebody spoke on last weekend or what's going on next weekend, that makes it so much better to do what Josh said, to remember back and see those patterns and that heart posture towards God.
Yeah, for sure. 5 or 6 years ago, I was at an experience out in Colorado, and a mentor of mine, friend of mine, Tim Bulkey, he shared with us this leadership principle that has really transformed a big part of my journaling. Because like you, Bill, I've been journaling maybe off and on for like 8 or 10 years, but mostly pretty surface level stuff. About 5 or 6 years ago, that really changed. Tim said, good leaders have great memories. And he just talks about that good leaders really have the ability to look back in the past and remember the faithfulness of God. And every time I hear that story, I think about Joshua 4. It is one of my favorite passages in the Bible. We're going to dive into it this week in our daily rhythm. But, the setup is pretty cool. Like, God speaks to Moses, you're going to get the promised land. They chicken out. They wander around the desert for 40 years. And then Moses hands over the reins to Joshua. I'm like, this is his moment. And Joshua sends in the spies, and they come out and they're like, God's already at work. You're not going to believe this. It's ours for the taking, but they have to cross the Jordan River. And so Joshua, like God shows up to Joshua and he says, hey, it's time. We're going across the river. But what I need you to do is I need you to, like, when you get there, let everybody pass before the Ark of the Covenant. And by the way, people, you should go back and read this story. It is ridiculously good. But here's the key part. They get to the other side of the Jordan, and all the people are like staring at Joshua, and this is his moment, right? For like God to transform his leadership in their eyes. And he says this, I'll read this just a little bit to you. He says, when your children ask in time, what do these 12 stones, they picked up these 12 stones, brought them out of the Jordan River. He says, what do these 12 stones mean? Then you should tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord. When it passed over the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. So these stones shall be to the people of Israel a memorial forever, a remembrance forever. And I think that's like the major principle of journaling, is it documents what God is doing, like you said, Bill, in us, sometimes through us, so that we can remember the faithfulness of God. And in our little like 5-6 year existence here, as we've been doing this Refresh and Encourage thing, Bill, the one story that sticks out in my mind is this experience you had at Refresh a few years back. I know you probably don't want to talk about this a whole lot because it's super like emotional or whatever, but I'll just set it up.
Are you saying I'm not emotional, Tim?
I'm not saying you're a robot. No, I'm just teasing. But so Bill, the very first Refresh at Haven, right?
Yeah.
We're in this brown little cottage with squirrels running around in the attic and whatnot. and we were sleeping in the same bedroom, different beds, but you woke up in the middle of the night, like something had happened, right? You had this dream. What happened after that? Like what was going on at that moment?
Yeah, it was just one of those moments. I'm sure a lot of us have had them where you have that dream that's so real that you wake up and you're not sure like what's reality and what's dream. And the precursor to that is my wife and I had not been able to have kids for better part of 14 years, 13, 14 years. We adopted two beautiful girls that are right outside this door doing schoolwork right now. And until that point, we had not been able to have a biological kid, and had multiple miscarriages, lots of different pain and hurt in that area. And honestly, I had kind of given up on the dream of what it looked like to have a biological son or a biological family member. And kind of like many of us do in painful situations, we just kind of put it in the other area, compartmentalize and move on. So that's like the context for it. So we were at this refresh, and nothing of real substance happened the night before. We were just doing our normal thing, and middle of the night I woke up and I just had the most vivid dream about a son, just a baby boy that I mean, everything from like the picture of my wife in a dress, you know, pregnant, to a new infant, to a 1-year-old, to a 3-year-old. Like God kind of took me through this journey in the dream, and I woke up and I was like, what was that? That wasn't real. That was a dream. And then it sunk in just how painful that it felt to kind of have that dream and then wake up and it's not real.
Yeah. And Josh, I mean, we both walked through this season with Bill and Jamie. Right. I mean, it was heavy, right?
For sure. Yeah.
For years.
Yeah. Like having known you as long as I have, Bill, thinking back to, like all of those attempts to have kids and like learning your guys' journey on the medical side of things and all of that. Like, one question I had though is like, had you ever had that dream before?
No, I'd never have any. And here's the thing, guys, I'm not a big dreamer. Like when I go to bed, I sleep. Like I'm out for the night and I wake up the next morning. Rarely do I remember the dreams. Yeah. And the thing about this that was so weird is when I woke up in the morning, like I had kind of woken up in the middle of the night and I'm like, oh, and then I kind of go back to bed and I wake up in the morning. Mm-hmm. And honestly, the thing I felt in that moment, the weirdest thing was you need to write down that dream.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I like to write down when I do something great and when God shows up in a great way. I do not want to journal about a dream, about a painful situation over years. I mean, that was something I didn't want to do. And so I laid there in bed and I'm like, how can I get out of this? And I just heard God clearly say, you just need to write it down.
Dude, listen, I remember when you woke up that morning, like you weren't right. That's the only way I can describe it. Yeah. Just something was off, you know, and I don't think you were teaching the next session. I think I was, but I just remember you weren't right. And you were asking me, like, this is what happened. And I'm thinking about writing it down or whatever. And we just talked just like for a minute and a half. I'm like, yeah, you should write that down. It wasn't like some big spiritual thing. It was just like, you should write that. It took you months of processing through that. I mean, we had many burgers and drinks talking about that dream and what happened following that. But here's the most beautiful thing, Bill. What happened after that?
Well, I wrote it down, which I don't want to skip over that because for me, I remember sitting at that table at Haven, and the table is actually in the same orientation now. So it's funny, you kind of look out to your right and there's the lake. And I remember sitting there, and I don't cry. Like I cried at the Lion King and Old Yeller. And I think when the Tigers lost the World Series, like that's when I cry. Like that's kind of my emotional barometer.
It's okay.
But I remember sitting there and like just starting to write the dream and just like bawling. And one of our friends, Adam, walked out, and you just seemed like he looks at me and just like walks the other way.
He's like, I just want some coffee.
Exactly. So I wrote it down, and here's the craziest thing. Nothing happened. I closed the journal. I went throughout months and nothing happened. There was no resolve. There was no like, this is awesome. Nothing. Just kind of sat in it. And I always struggled with the idea of, I wrote this down, God, you told me to journal, to remember. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I personally think part of it's for you to process the, I don't know if despair is the right word, but just the depth of what you're feeling with the infertility, right?
Yeah.
That's one part of the journaling process is the transformation of what's happening. And you, Josh, and I know you were being transformed in that process.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
Dude,
sure.
When you had the last miscarriage, I don't even know what number it was because it was a lot. Like, it's almost like a switch flipped a little bit. Like it was, I felt like for a moment, I'm like, he could be done. You were mad. You were really mad.
Yeah. I think Jamie and I both felt there was a lot of pain. And for anybody out there who's been through infertility, when it starts and stops and starts and stops and you get your hopes up, you become a little cynical and jaded over time in the process, which is, interesting for me to have to process through that. But I did. And I remember, fast forward a few years later, literally probably 18 months later, at a moment with my wife and I where she told me she was pregnant again. And I kind of had that, like many of us do when we go through pain. Okay. Well, how's this going to work out? Here we go again. Yeah. All of that. We've all been through that.
Yeah.
And the beautiful part about that is now we have a 10-month-old son. And it's crazy. This is just a funny little story. So we got pregnant, stayed pregnant, went through all of just a perfect pregnancy. My wife was just a champ through the whole process. Everything was textbook. It was this experience that we'd never had before in being through the pregnancy process, having a baby. And I remember, Tim, and I'm not a prophet, like, trust me, y'all know me. I remember the day the doctor called to tell us the gender. And I'm sitting there and my wife's like, you can't tell them you think it's a boy because you had this dream. And I'm like, no, I'm not saying I said, I'm not saying it's, my dream. That was me processing through my grief in some way. And God was working through that. But I'm literally in my mind, I'm like, it's a boy. It's a boy. Mm-hmm. And so they got on the call and my wife put it on speakerphone. And I literally said out loud, she got so mad. I was like, don't worry, guys. The doctor's just going to say it's a boy. And my kids start laughing and, and whatever.
I'm not saying it's a boy, but it's a boy.
and listen,
Bill, how vivid was the dream? Like, not to take us all the way back there, but like, you don't have to go into all the details, but like, there's a reason that you just said, like, well, the doctor's going to say it's a boy. Yeah. Like, how does that moment connect to the moment in the journal with the dream?
It felt like God was showing me something. Mm-hmm. And I'm not one that thinks we always have dreams that are super spiritual and God, I had indigestion last night and I had this weird dream, I've had enough of those eating pizza. But there's a difference. And I think we all know it in moments in life that God ordains that we write them down. Like that's the key to me. Cause I remember waking up that morning and going, that was so real. God, why would you do that?
Yeah.
Just to show us more pain. And what I didn't know, and what many of us don't know when we're journaling or writing things down or remembering, is we're seeing this one moment and God's seeing everything. Mm-hmm. And so it felt to me like God, now sitting here, like God was showing me a picture of what was going to happen and telling me to have faith. In that year and a half there, I did not know that. And so, I think writing it down was so critical. I remember, this last January, it was the 2-year anniversary of that dream. I was journaling on the same date and I kind of flipped back and just taking that moment with God and celebrating and going, God, you showed me something that I didn't think was possible. It was painful. I wrote it down. I remember, and you're faithful. And the truth is God would have been faithful in my life, whether we had a kid or not. God's been faithful in so many different areas. I mean, we can all do this, but it's like, I have proof that God's faithful, right? Like, yeah, we can all do it.
Comparing the stacks?
No. Right. But I think we can all look back. One situation doesn't make God more faithful than another.
No.
But the fact that he
go ahead.
The fact that he let me into that process, and I had friends around me that can encourage me to write that down was key.
Yeah.
Well, and there's something about just the reality of like there's so much in just one of these that I've probably already like forgotten's like a strong word, but like filed somewhere else, right? But when you
Yeah.
go through it, like Bill, yours is a perfect example. Maybe even just the exercise of writing it down to remember, so you can
Yeah.
look at that and be like, that actually happened. Like
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
happened. Like I wrote it down because it happened. Not 10 years from now when you're telling the story and you didn't write it down. You're like, yeah, I think I had like a dream once.
Yeah.
And you can apply that to like
Yeah.
any of the things that we write in a journal.
Totally.
Tim, one of the things you've said to me a lot, you may not even know that you've said this to me, but you have, is that when you look through your journal, it shows you patterns of thinking and behavior that you can reflect on. What's your experience with that been like?
Yeah, I think there's like three reasons I journal. The first is to process what God is doing in the moment. Second is to document it so that I can look back and remember the faithfulness of God. But the third is, to me, I'm a little hard-headed and I don't always get it on the first attempt, you know? So what I find is I do this practice thanks to Tim Bulke. I looked at my journal maybe 2 or 3 times a year, and I literally go backwards and I read the whole thing. And, you know, sometimes I just really quickly go over a date or even a week. But what I've started to do is I've started to recognize something deep spiritually happening. I almost like earmark the page, or I'll highlight the page so I can come back to it. Because what I have found is God will speak consistently over time about the same topic, if you will.
Yeah.
And when you see your own handwriting 19 times over 3 years with God saying, hey, you should do this, or it's like, oh,
okay.
Maybe he's trying to transform something in me. And I mean, honestly, like, let me count the themes that has popped up over the last number of years. But it's been a really big deal for me because I know my handwriting. I know I wrote it. It's not for anybody else. I can't go back and undo what I wrote down, because the thing is, we remember history different than it actually happened.
Yeah, all the time.
All the time, right? In real time, same events. Watch CNN, watch Fox. They have a different interpretation of reality, right? The farther we get away from that event, the faster and the quicker the facts and the circumstances change. When you write it down, you can't change it. That is genuinely how you felt and processed in that moment. And when I go back and I look at what's happened in my life and what God has done, it builds up this incredibly great faith that he did it in the past and he can do it again. It also reminds me that he is moving through these themes in my life. You know, money, pride, the way I talk to people, the way I value people. Right now, he's speaking deeply about this idea that, you know, God's love is not controlled. I think is what it says in Ephesians 4. I think is what we read a couple weekends ago. And it's just this idea that, like, he goes all out in his love, and my love should be the same way. That's been a theme in my life for many, many years, and it's just popping up again and again. And it, just to tie it back to that verse in Joshua, that's what he's asking us to do, is to create these. I think journals are like almost like memorial stones. 100%. This is what he's done, right? This is what he's done. Don't forget it. And that's why in the Old Testament, God says over and over and over, write these truths on your heart, write them on the doorpost. Yeah. That's why I think I'm getting into theological territory that I probably don't know a whole lot about, but I think that's right. That's why early on the Jews memorized the Torah, you know, so it was like writing it on their heart versus now we have the scriptures and we don't memorize scripture as much. It's like, right. And part of the historical context there is that it was passed orally. Right. It was because an oral tradition. Not everybody could read or write, you know, like that's a common theme through a lot of, you know, the modern world and all that. But so you not only memorized it because God said to, you memorized it so you could then continue to share. So I even think about that with all my journals. Like there are moments of, like, obviously, like, very
there's very raw things, deeply personal things God is saying, doing, things I'm either struggling with or celebrating, highs and lows. It's all there, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know if you guys do this. I write in a way so that like in 50 years or less or more, I don't know, like maybe my kids or my grandkids
totally
will go through these and either see the themes or what God did. And just like you said, that memorial, that memorial stone, or like, so no matter what, like maybe not what they thought about me, but like they could see what God was doing in me when they were little, and all of that stuff. And just, it's that whole thing. I don't want to give too much away about what we do with Refresh and Encourage, but it's that legacy piece. Remember, right. We talk about the legacy, we talk about the remembering, the porch session and all that stuff. That's a big, that's honestly a big motivating catalyst for me to continue to journal. Not so I can brag about what God did, but like my kids, my grandkids, my wife, like they'll be able to. Hopefully.
Well, journaling's like looking in a mirror as well, and so it's like, you can't, you just see your reflection back when you do that. And I had this thought, it was like I think it was when my youngest Harper was born. And I just remember having this moment, second kid. It's like, if something happens to me, she will not remember me. Mm-hmm. And so that's when I got really serious about journaling, because I'm like, there are things I want to teach my kids, whether I'm here or not. And so I very similar to you, Josh, I started writing in a fashion of total honesty and transparency. I mean, there's some things, if my kids read that too soon, they would be like, wow, he's not the man, I thought he was.
Right.
But I think with time and experience, they'll get it. But I wanted to be raw and authentic and transparent, but I also wanted to be able to write to them in a way to teach them if I'm not here. I don't do that every day like that, but anyway, my point is I want them to know their dad. So for you young dads out there, if there's any doubt of why you should start journaling as you dive in chasing to Jesus, let that sink in for a minute, because that hit me like a ton of bricks when somebody told me that. But yeah, anyway, it's like this mirror that it's like reflecting back to you, and it causes change in the heart when you read it back.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
So this week we're going to dive into Joshua 4 and outline many parts of this passage. We'll skip around a little bit to tell the whole story in this daily rhythm. But listen, journaling is a big deal. It's not a dear diary. It's the processing of what God is doing in you. It's remembering his faithfulness and allowing him to transform us in time and over time as we reflect back. I'll reiterate what Tim Bulke told me so many years ago: good leaders remember. And I'll just say good parents, good wives, good pastors, good everybody. They have a great memory of the faithfulness of God. And that is why we journal. So thanks for joining us. Next week is going to be amazing. We're going to tackle this topic of Sabbath, something that the three of us are learning in real time. And so we're going to talk about that. One quick thing before we let you go, speaking of journaling, we are coming out. Josh, hold that leather journal up real quick. We're coming out with a new Sequel leather journal in partnership with Rustico. Oh, that looks so good. It smells good too, I can just tell you.
That does smell good.
Yeah, super, super limited supply. It'll come out soon, so keep your eye on that. Join us next week as we talk about Sabbath, and we will see you guys soon.